Her name was Leila. Born in an ordinary neighborhood, in a house where walls carried more cracks than decoration, she grew up with one thing carved into her heart: I will never live like this again. As a child, she remembered the way her mother used to sew clothes by candlelight when the electricity was cut. The smell of kerosene lamps, the constant whispers about unpaid rent, and the small tremble in her father's voice whenever a bill arrived. These became Leila's earliest lullabies. But she was not like other children who accepted their fate. Leila carried an unshakable fire inside her chest. At 8 years old, she sat by the window of her small room and told herself, "One day, I will have everything. A house with golden lights, clothes that shine, a car that makes people turn their heads. I will never be small again." And so, her eyes learned to see the world differently. Where others saw happiness in a simple family meal, she saw the shame of an old tablecloth. Where others saw peace in prayer, she saw wasted time that could be spent building a future. Where others found joy in companionship, Leila found a hunger to rise above them. By the time she entered university, Leila had already sharpened herself into someone unstoppable. She worked part-time jobs, sold handmade crafts online, and never let herself rest. Money was not just a need, it was her heartbeat. Her friends admired her ambition. They whispered about how Leila always walked faster than them, how she spoke of dreams so big they seemed like films. She told them, "I won't just survive, I'll own the world." And they believed her. Yet, in the quiet of the night, when everyone else slept, Leila often stared at the ceiling, her mind restless. A small, fragile voice in her heart asked, "What if I lose myself in this chase?" But she silenced it quickly. Dreamers had no room for doubt. One day, during a lecture, her professor spoke about contentment, about how success is not measured in what we own, but in the peace within our hearts. Leila smiled politely, but inside, she laughed. Peace doesn't pay the bills. Peace doesn't buy silk dresses or apartments with glass balconies. She told herself, the world belongs to those who reach for it, not to those who sit content in the dust. And so, step by step, her journey began. The world was about to open its doors to Leila, but with every step forward, a shadow followed silently behind. The first coin she earned had felt light in her hand, like a blessing. But soon the coins grew heavier, not because of their weight, but because of the hold they had on her heart. At first, she worked to provide for her family. She sold handmade cloth, her fingers weaving beauty with patience. Each sale brought her joy, not because of the profit, but because she knew it helped someone in need. But slowly, something changed. She began to notice the glitter of gold more than the smiles of her customers. She began to dream of larger stalls, finer fabrics, and riches that would make her name known in the market. Her heart, once soft, began to harden with desire. The prayer rug in the corner of her room began to gather dust. The call of the adhan reached her ears, but her hands would not leave the scales and coins. "Just one more customer," she would whisper. "Just one more sale. Then I will pray." But prayers delayed became prayers missed. Her nights, once filled with the sweetness of Quran, were now filled with the clinking of coins she counted again and again. She thought wealth was giving her life meaning, but in truth, it was slowly taking it away. One evening, as the sun bled its last light across the rooftops, she returned home late. Her hands carried baskets filled with goods, but her eyes were heavy with exhaustion. At her door, a frail hand reached out to her. An old woman bent with age, her clothes torn, her eyes hollow with hunger. "Daughter," the woman whispered, "a piece of bread, a sip of water, anything." For a moment, her heart stirred. But then, her eyes fell upon the gold tucked safely in her pouch. Her lips tightened. She shook her head and walked inside, closing the door behind her. That night, she lay in her soft bed, but sleep would not come. Instead, the old woman's face haunted her. Her pleading eyes were like a mirror, showing the emptiness of her own soul. She remembered a verse her father used to recite. "Wealth and children are but adornment of the worldly life, but the enduring good deeds are better to your Lord for reward, and better for one's hope." Her chest tightened. When had she forgotten? When had the gold in her hands become more precious than the mercy in her heart? The clinking of coins no longer sounded sweet. It rang like chains around her spirit. The days grew heavier, as if the skies themselves were warning her. One morning she awoke to the sound of voices outside, shouting, crying, panic. She rushed out and saw smoke rising in the distance. Her heart sank. It was the market, the same market where she had hoarded her treasures. The stalls, the storage, the chest of coins she had hidden, all swallowed by fire, The wealth she guarded so fiercely melted into ash before her eyes. She fell to her knees, trembling. Her neighbors rushed past her, saving what little they could, but she stood frozen, watching her fortune vanish in the flames. That night, her house felt emptier than ever. The silence was heavy, broken only by the echo of her own weeping. She remembered the poor, the hungry, the old woman at her door, those she had turned away. And now, when she needed comfort, there was no one at her side. For the first time, she realized, her riches had never loved her. They had never held her when she was broken. They had only blinded her heart until Allah stripped them away. The fire had left her with nothing but the walls of her home, no gold, no jewels, no comfort to shield her heart. For days, she barely ate. The silence weighed heavy, but within that silence, a new thought was born. One evening, she walked through the same market, now charred and broken. Among the ashes, she saw families rebuilding together, neighbors sharing bread, children laughing even in poverty. They had little, yet they still had each other. She envied them, not for their food or their laughter, but for the peace on their faces, peace she had never felt even in the richest of nights. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. A single question burned in her chest. What have I done with the life Allah gave me? She remembered verses she once heard but never listened to. Wealth and children are but adornment of the worldly life, but the enduring good deeds are better to your Lord for reward and better for one's hope. Her heart trembled. For the first time, tears fell not for her loss, but for her blindness. Wealth had chained her, and Allah, in His mercy, had broken those chains by taking it all away. She finally whispered into the darkness, Ya Allah, forgive me. Give me another chance. The morning after her prayer felt different. For the first time in years, she woke not searching for her gold, but for her purpose. She walked to the marketplace again, but this time not as a buyer. She carried bread, simple warm loaves she baked with her own hands. She offered them to the hungry. The poor who once watched her pass with disdain now looked at her with surprise. Some refused at first, thinking it was pity, but she smiled gently and said, No. It is not pity, it is gratitude. Gratitude to Allah for giving me more than I ever deserved day after day. She returned. The children began to run to her when they saw her coming. The widows blessed her with prayers. The market, once filled with whispers about her vanity, now echoed with whispers of her change. She felt something she had never felt before. Peace. The kind of peace no jewel could buy, no palace could contain. Yet in quiet moments, she still wondered, would Allah forgive her wasted years? Would He accept this new heart she was trying to build? And then, as if in answer, she remembered another verse. Indeed, Allah loves those who repent and purify themselves. For the first time in her life, she believed those words were meant for her. News of her change spread quickly. Some were touched, others suspicious. People don't change overnight, they whispered. She must be seeking praise. One afternoon, a wealthy merchant approached her. He had heard of her generosity and offered her partnership. Your name is being spoken again, he said with a sly smile. Together, we could restore your old status, gold, servants, respect. But with the appearance of charity, her heart trembled. For a moment, she remembered the feel of silk gowns, the taste of feasts that lasted until dawn. The temptation was strong. But then she thought of the night she cried on the cold floor, begging Allah for forgiveness. She thought of the hungry child who kissed her hand after receiving bread. She thought of the verse that reminded her, wealth is a test, not a crown. She looked the merchant in the eye and said softly, I do not seek to buy respect anymore. I seek only the respect of the one above. The merchant scoffed and left, but in her heart, she felt something break free, the last chain of pride that had bound her for years. Her sincerity was tested, and this time she did not fail. Seasons passed. The woman was no longer known as the arrogant mistress of silk halls, but as the gentle hand that fed the poor, the quiet soul who prayed at dawn. Her home never regained its old glory, yet in its modest walls, peace lived. Neighbors began to speak differently of her, not of her downfall, but of her transformation. One evening, as the sun sank into hues of gold and crimson, a young girl came to her door. She was the daughter of the very servant she once had mistreated. With shy eyes, the girl whispered, My mother says you saved her life. She says you gave us dignity when no one else cared. She told me to thank you. Tears welled in the woman's eyes, not from pride, but from gratitude. She realized Allah had not humiliated her. He had purified her. The wealth that once blinded her heart was gone, but in its place was something far richer: humility, sincerity, and forgiveness. And in that moment, she understood. Her story was not one of loss, but of mercy.